I'm super excited to be moderating this panel. I think it'll be really interesting and looking forward to it. And largely because we have some great panelists. First, I'll introduce myself quickly. I have been doing product marketing for over a decade now, and most recently at Match Group, where I was running the portfolio's product marketing for their evergreen and emerging dating apps. So I'll pass it off now to Emmy.
Awesome. My name is Emmy Hoffmeister. I am currently the VP of Product Marketing for Lattice, which is an HR and AI tech platform, helping our customers manage people, processing payments, et cetera. So really excited to share show some of my experiences. Should I popcorn over to Michael?
Well, hey everybody, I'm Michael Olson. I'm a senior director and head of product marketing for observability at Splunk. We're a Cisco company, and super passionate about product marketing. Love geeking out on the topic, and excited to hang out with y'all today.
All right, I'll pick up the end. I'm Madeline Ng. I lead growth go-to-market for Google Maps platform. I have a little over a decade of product marketing experience and sales experience. And prior to leading growth, which is really trying to drive our online business, I actually led marketing for Google Maps platform. So I really had the opportunity of really seeing where the function of product marketing has grown and how it's actually propelled me into new and different directions.
Great. All right, let's go ahead and dive in. To start, we're going to talk about current hot topic on everyone's mind, AI. How do you think AI is influencing sales roles and outcomes?
Michael, you want to go?
Sure, I can take an initial take just based on what I'm seeing, and then would love to hear from the rest of the group. I'm seeing a few things on this topic. One, I would say, is sort of the emergence of what I would call like AI-powered sales productivity tools. So think, using agentic AI and AI agents to be able to do things like if you're in a sales role, to be able to research accounts, to prep for meetings, to sort of kind of track deal progress a lot faster. And so I think what there are some emerging tools out there that can help with are things like, if you're in a sales role, being able to ask questions to an AI agent, like, hey, build me a stakeholder map for key stakeholders in my account and essentially an org chart for my account. Help me score this deal, using MEDPIC or whatever sales methodology that we've operationalized within our company. What are the top 3 whys or careabouts for my account to help zero in on customer problems and potential use cases to qualify for? And then even being able to sort of inspect, like, hey, what that last discovery call that I had with this economic buyer, like, what feedback did they have? And I think part of the magic is actually being able to use generative AI to be able to encode your sales methodology as rules, and then train LLMs and AI agents to help you just be more productive as a sales rep. So I think that's pretty rad. And then the other example that I've seen that I'll just speak to really quickly, because we're actually starting to use it within Cisco, is and this is more from an enablement perspective, is actually training AI agents to simulate or practice customer meetings, which I think is really useful if you're in a sales role and you want to sort of like practice how to navigate a discovery call or how to qualify a prospect in or out, based on product market fit, or like practice your pitch and your sales messaging. Interacting with an AI agent that's been trained to sort of simulate and pretend like they're a prospect.
I love that example. I think there's so much that we can train on in terms of coaching and how the customers respond, and even just picking up on gong calls, like feeding an agent with gong calls, so real customer questions and objections that have been asked. A couple other areas that we're seeing a lot of impact for our sales team is prioritization. So using Gong AI, using other tools to help understand where we are in the deal cycle, which deals are healthy, which deals aren't healthy, and how, essentially helping reps plan their weeks, plan their days of where should they be investing time and energy to drive better outcomes for themselves and for the business. So that piece around prioritization, just really quickly being able to kind of look across your accounts to know where to focus, is like a nice quick win for our team. I think that the other area where we're seeing a lot of traction is like just quick access to information that was previously, you had to ask a Slack channel and wait for a response, or dig through all of the different assets that have been created. And we have a number of tools that we're, I would say, both testing, but also like really actively, finding success with, of getting customer quotes or relevant customer stories, just like, right away, being able to surface the most like relevant information for the conversation you're about to have. So I'll give a shout out to a tool that we're using called PeerBound, which just scrapes all of the Gong calls that we have, or all of the information in Salesforce and Gong, and is able to surface relevant customer stories, quotes, cut it by industry, to cut it by persona. So giving reps access to that information. And then also like competitive, like it's a really quick tool for competitive too. So, hey, I'm up against this competitor. What are some reasons that we win? Being able to look through all of our Slack channels on reasons that we've beat that competitor in the past, synthesize it and pull it forward. These quick wins and like quick automations have been really, really powerful for not only sales. I want to say it's been really powerful for product marketing as well.
Yeah, plus one to all of those things. I would say just keying off of Emmy, what you just shared about getting information from a product marketing angle, it's also a huge value add to have a repository that surfaces all of our product information. We work with a suite of, depending on how you look at it, between 30 and 60 SKUs, which is really just too much for any individual sales rep to hold into their heads. And so we put it all in. I mean, granted, where I work, we do use Notebook LM quite a bit, but you put it into a repo that people can then query, which allows you to get that just-in-time information, which is basically the most critical information for any sales rep. So once they use the AI to actually help them prioritize and figure out their customer list, they can really have that most pertinent product-related content that they feel like they can whip out at the time when they really need it. So it's been a great set of tools, honestly. But there is, as always, a learning curve depending on the maturity or the willingness of a given rep to participate in different tools.
I feel like there are a lot of AI tools that I need to look up because they sound super helpful and really interesting. One thing that I always find to be a challenge, so I'm looking forward to hearing your responses, is just how do you best measure product marketing contributions against sales success? Anyone can jump in. I'll let Emmy, you go ahead.
Sure, I can start. I think so it's a great question, right? Because there's a lot of different metrics that product marketing is ultimately responsible for helping to drive, but rarely maybe directly responsible for. Like there's always a couple people in between the work that we're doing and the outcomes that the business sees. But I can tell you where my team is particularly focused right now. The first and foremost is pipeline. So are we contributing in ways that drive meaningful pipeline for our reps, for the business? And so, a couple things that we're specifically responsible for are the types of, when people are coming maybe to our site through a paid ad or through organic search, when they're coming to our site, are we setting up, the demos or kind of interactive elements that are ultimately driving people to request a demo or request learning more? So we've done a lot of testing and iterating on both what is the messaging, but what's also kind of the interactive element within the website experience or an email experience that's going to drive that interest and kind of encourage someone to do more. So that's one area where we really measure our impact, is like, are we continuing to optimize the types of assets or the messaging? And through our partnership with our fellow marketers, kind of growth marketers, making sure that we're bringing in the right traffic and converting them. I think the second area that we really look at is win rate, and this is especially like tied to maybe a product launch or an initiative that we're trying to drive. So if we can understand what is our benchmark around win rate, and are we delivering assets or a training or maybe even helping better qualify the audience that we're reaching, are we contributing to an improvement in that win rate for our sales team? And then the other thing that we spend a lot of time doing, and again, I think AI helps us better analyze this, but we spend a lot of time looking at gong calls, like our reps getting tripped up over questions. Like we know that our product marketing efforts are effective for sales if reps feel like confident, dialed in, know how to answer the questions, have the information they need about the product. So we'll spend some time looking through Gong and really seeing, okay, where are the places where people are getting stuck, and then how do we unstick them through, better information. Maybe it's creating different types of content, or really doubling down on just making sure that people have had an opportunity to practice their pitch or their statements around some of the key objections that we're seeing.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, you've pretty much covered everything. I would say I'm particularly impressed about being able to assess product marketing asset related attribution for win rate. It's something that we've been trying to tackle, but has been a little bit hard to fully get buy-in for, simply because the processes that we use tend to be more manual. And so if you have any tips and tricks on how to unlock that particular metric, that would be huge, because it's something that we've been chasing, to be completely honest with you. We tend to often work off of more so that last stage that you mentioned, which is sales perceived readiness, sales almost perception, I guess, in the quality of what they've been receiving and their capacity to use it to actually move deals forward. But again, it's not incredibly systematic or programmatic the way that we're able to assess at this time.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed a lot of what I was kind of thinking too. And one of the challenging things about product marketing, as you said, is like we're kind of string pullers behind the scenes, right? Like defining the positioning and messaging that gets activated through demand gen campaigns that then drive lead gen. But the sales team is they're actually moving prospects through a buying cycle, and so attribution becomes a little bit fuzzier. But we tend to look at a combination of both leading indicators and lagging indicators. And some of the leading indicators are more tactical, right? It's things like sales enablement asset usage, as you talk about. We do things like certify, our sales team on our kind of our core sales messaging. And then another metric that I like to look at is also like percentage of your sales reps that have active pipeline for my product line. Because I find that's a signal of a healthy business. You don't want to be dependent on like either a few big whales in your deal pipeline in order to hit your number, nor do you want to be dependent on like a few superheroes in your sales team who are like the only people who know how to sell your product. And so making sure you've got like a high number of your sales force that's being productive, generating pipeline for your product line, I think is a signal of health. And then lagging indicators are really sort of the business metrics that ultimately matter. So things like sales pipeline, bookings and or revenue, depending on kind of what matters for your specific org. And then we look really hard at win rates as well, because that's a key measure of sales efficiency. Like how likely are we, once we generate an opportunity, to successfully move through a prospect through a buying cycle and won that opportunity. Those are kind of the key lagging indicators that we measure and care about.
What's the biggest challenge you've seen translating product stories to those sales narratives, that the sales team can like really get behind?
I'll start and say that for us, the biggest one is actually being able to provide all of the quantitative, credible proof points, coming particularly from a diverse enough customer base to have resonance with every salesperson. It's very, I wouldn't say it's simple, but it's much easier to train on things that are based upon what you have in-house. But when it comes down to really being able to document ROI, really crisp and clear customer stories, and not just from, I think, Michael, you put it as a good point, the few whales or the few customers that you often tend to go back to, but really a diverse set of globally, industry-wide, persona-wide conversations that would enable that salesperson to really have the information they need to convince a very wide and diverse population. So for me, that has always been the hardest challenge. And it really is because it has to do with those customers having achieved success at a pace that you need them to achieve success, and then more so their willingness to actually communicate that success broadly. So for us, that has always been the bottleneck.
Yeah, I completely agree. I don't know if I have much to add. I will say that I've been in a number of situations where having the rep almost needs to experience the success of their own customer, or like especially in a more customer oriented business. I was at LinkedIn for a long time, and we had a brand new product launch, net new product in the market, and most of our field was relationship managers, so had deep relationships with these customers already, deep trust built with these customers. And the hard part for us was like convincing them that this was going to be additive, that this was going to be a great experience. And I remember a customer that just got it, like a customer that really understood the value of the product, used the product, and then went back to their rep and was like, "Oh my God, this thing is amazing. I just accomplished all this stuff that, I had been wanting to do or that I had been hoping I could do." And all of the sudden, that rep was off to the races. Like it clicked for them, like having firsthand heard it from their customer, they were able to start doing the work of translating for different types of accounts or different industries that they were working with. But I think it was just like really believing the story or really believing in the product as told to them from a customer versus told to them from marketing, was such a huge unlock.
Yeah, my take is the sales messaging has to resonate both internally with your sales team and most importantly with customers. And we kind of have like four main sort of guiding principles for any sales messaging that, product marketing produces. Like one, it's got to be relevant. It's got to be germane to your target audience's day job and the things that keep them up at night, and really take an outside-in approach around like leading with, the customer's problems and the challenges they face, and then ultimately describing the promised land before you ever talk about your solution and how you help them solve those problems. Second, it's got to be differentiated. Like I think, I've spent most of my career in pretty competitive market categories where it's easy for different vendor messaging to kind of sound the same. And so we really challenge our team to make sure that any messaging sounds different from how competitors talk. And we also tend to sort of shy away from like unsubstantiated first only best claims that I think lead to skepticism among buyers. And then third, it's got to create clarity, right? It's got to create the immediate light bulb moments of like, oh, I get it. Like, I understand why I should care and what problems, your product or solution solves. And then last, it's got to drive intent. It's got to get, prospect to be like, oh yeah, not only do I get it, but like I need that right now, and create sort of the intent to buy. And the only other thing that I'll say that maybe sounds a little bit more tactical, but I found has worked really well when crafting sales messaging is really using words that your customers use and actually writing the messaging in like a messaging framework or the talk track for a sales deck exactly like you would say it out loud in a real world conversation with a prospect. And so we use the term a lot in my team, like conversational tone or barbecue speak, which is basically like a zero jargon policy, and making it, really truly kind of leverage words that, and phrases and sentences that you would hear directly from a customer in a conversation. And I find that creates better adoption of the messaging by the sales team. And also decreases the likelihood of like off-roading or, sales and marketing teams kind of making up their own way of talking about things. So if you're trying to avoid messaging drift, that becomes sort of an important part of the equation.
I love barbecue talk. That's great. I'm gonna steal that. It's perfect for summer too. So thanks, Michael. So relatedly, how do you effectively get buy-in from the sales team?
I mean, I could start on this one. I think, this might maybe sort of be a tough love answer, but I think PMMs really have to like earn the right and earn permission and earn credibility with the sales team. And the only way you do that is really by proving your value and proving that you understand deeply the market in which you play, the ideal customer profiles and personas who care about your thing, like your product or your solution, their needs, the competitive landscape, and what makes you different from competitors. And, my advice to like particularly early stage product marketers is like becoming an expert on your product, and like its speeds and feeds is necessary, but not sufficient. And like, in my opinion, great PMMs that really earn the respective sales teams, they become experts not just on a product, but on the market and the buyers and the broader context in which the product is used and why it matters. And I think when you're getting up in front of your sales teams, to get buy-in on messaging, that earns the credibility and permission. And then I think the last thing I'll say is like bi-directional feedback loops are so critical. And a PMM really should be almost like a news reporter at times, going out and getting feedback from across the field and across the organization on like, hey, what's resonating well and what's not? Like, what are you hearing from your customers? And bringing all those data points in, synthesizing, distilling them into a message that everybody can get behind.
I'm just going to say +1 to everything Michael said. It is challenging to build that credibility, but the payoff once you've established yourself within an organization, or your team has established themselves within the organization, really pays dividends. Something I did not in my current position, but at a previous organization, was actually send my PMMs to co-sell. So they would actually be in the room during an early sales process, because really nothing makes you sweat like saying your own messaging as you, to a customer. And that type of outside in perspective is game changing, and it makes you much more empathetic to the whole process. I think therefore also garners your respect.
I love all of that. Maybe the one ad is like, also don't be afraid for sales to create the best content, and then you see your job as to scale that content, right? Like I've been in several situations where, a great rep comes forward with just the perfect way of talking about a product or the value of our products, or kind of like painting the scene of what we're really trying to deliver and help our customers understand. And then it's like, okay, this is perfect. Let us apply. It's usually not branded correctly, so let us like rebrand this. Let us pull in like a couple of like small tweaks to make sure that this is consistent with what we're saying in market, with like, how we want to be presented. And then you're going to go help us champion this, this deck or this positioning with the rest of your peers. You're going to talk about when you've used it, how, like why it's been successful, what customers or prospects really gravitate towards. So where almost any role that I've been in or any company I've been in, there are the reps that create their own content, and really, partnering with them, figuring out what's working and why it's working, and then making your job being more about scale than creation, I think can have a really big impact and help to earn credibility as well.
Yeah,
I
I think
think
that's. Oh, I was just gonna chop in too. That's a great point. I think like allowing for that ownership for the sales team too, when it makes sense, it really resonates.
Yeah, I totally agree. I love that, Emmy. And I think like, ego is the enemy of good product marketing. Like, you need to be able to sort of look objectively at messaging and what's resonating well and what's not. And the field, sales teams tend to have great ideas because they're out in the trenches talking to customers every day. And I think you framed it really well. Like part of our job is to bring in what's working and synthesize it and, sharpen it and tighten it and then scale it. That's really well said.
All right, now to the final question for me, because we've had a number of Q&A come through, so looking forward to diving into those shortly. But what have you seen as the most effective strategies to drive adoption of assets and enablement resources to drive success against your go-to-market plays?
My answer is incredibly unscalable and really touches on the topic we just mentioned. Um, and I know we don't love having, a few people sort of in hand across maybe your global sales organization, but ultimately, despite all of the best intents, it really does come down to getting a few advocates. So you find a few folks who you really think are leaned in. They might be leaned in because of the industry. They might be leaned in because of their customer list. They may be leaned in because they just have a propensity for the product that you're trying to promote. But really find those folks and then make them absurdly successful, and they will advocate on your behalf all day, every day. But it is not scalable. It isn't quick. And if anyone has a better way of doing it, please do educate this larger group.
My immediate like kind of knee-jerk reaction to this question is, how can you figure out how to create customization at scale? So again, like when I was at LinkedIn, we had this homegrown tool that allowed us to pull in account specific data for all of our decks and slides, right? So we could like basically highlight, here's what if you're, if you're a prospect, or if you're thinking about expanding, like here's what the opportunity looks like based on, your company's LinkedIn data or the audience that you're trying to reach and specific data associated with them. But every single kind of like slide and data point and opportunity could be incredibly customized, even though the template was very much a scaled out template and like, kind of reapplied to every conversation. The information inside of it was different or personalized. And that, in terms of adoption, I mean, it was just, there was no question. It was like every single Every rep was using the tool, was pulling relevant slides. Maybe they would adapt their deck depending on what the conversation looked like. But the ability to very quickly access account specific information in a way that was consistent with what we wanted to say, kind of, brand standards, et cetera, was a game changer in terms of, people basically kind of using the same thing to tell a consistent story to the market. I think that we are at a place right now with AI where this like customization at scale is very possible. I don't have like a tool recommendation, but I think that there's the ability to make the content that maybe product marketing creates highly customized to the specific account that you're talking to, very like readily, rapidly pulling in maybe Salesforce data, Gong data, other information that just exists, and being able to have those more personalized conversations feels like the way, in my mind, one of the ways, but a key way to drive adoption.
Yeah, good stuff. Maybe two anecdotes that I would offer up is one, so I work in a much larger company now than I did earlier in my career. Like Splunk is roughly 8,000 people. We're part of Cisco, which is an 80,000 person company. My experience has been that really investing in like small forum road shows for new messaging where you can get bi-directional feedback and where say like sales team members feel comfortable speaking up and giving you feedback on like what resonates and what doesn't becomes really useful, much more useful than like kind of one-way webinar style enablement for for sales teams. Earlier in my career, I was in much smaller companies and startups and kind of earlier stage growth companies where like the entire sales org was maybe 25 to 30 people, and you could get everybody in a room together on a weekly basis for training sessions or at sales kickoffs. And one of the things that Madeline, you said earlier that I think really resonated with me was I always found it was most effective when I'd be getting up on stage at like a sales kickoff or a sales training if I was introducing a new first call deck or a corporate pitch deck. And before even going through it, being able to like pinpoint and say like half of the room, half the people in this room were directly in the trenches working with me and my team on the development of this messaging. I think that lends credibility to show again that we've been bi-directional and that we've been directly engaging the sales team on the development of any new sales messaging. And that makes it stick a lot better because people trust their peers.
All right, I'm going to start diving into some of the questions that the audience has. So we'll start with David, who asked, how do you recommend starting to measure sales enablement? Is there a good way to benchmark how enabled sales is currently, and what milestones would you look for to assess enablement progress over time?
We just did something like this, so I can share what we just did. I mean, I think there's probably multiple answers, but we launched a new product in the fall, enabled sales at the time, but we're noticing that there are still a lot of questions coming through in Slack and other places that indicated, hey, maybe there's an opportunity for deeper enablement, but let's really figure out where and what's needed. So we like got a group of go-to-market leaders together. We listened to a bunch of sales calls. We graded those calls. So we essentially graded like discovery, quality of the pitch, knowledge of the product, like the ability to handle objections, et cetera. So we had a really concrete scorecard. And then identified because of that, like some areas that we needed to lean in and go deeper in terms of how reps were practicing and the type of knowledge and even the assets that were available to them. So we kind of put together the overall enablement program, created the assets, and this was a stretch of about like 2 months, and did the enablement, and then we went back. And we used the same scorecard to assess, okay, how after going through all of that and giving everyone more time to practice and really figure out like what is this platform positioning that they're leaning into? How do they handle questions about, these types of competitors, et cetera? Like after going through those practices, we then did the scorecard again. And what we were able to see is it was a 5-point scale. We improved our very objective, but, for lack of a better way to do this, our objective assessment of how well reps were performing against these different areas. And so we improved overall performance by about 1 point, which on a 5-point scale was pretty significant, and, gained a lot more confidence in, what the field knew and could do, but also then again through the reassessment, okay, further areas where we know we want to stand up, lunch and learns or kind of like monthly re-enablement sessions to continue to plug away at what we know is probably the hardest part of really getting this new product and this new product positioning down.
All right, I'll move on to the next question if no one has anything to add. If you were a solo PMM, what are the first few sales enablement assets or programs you would see as important to prioritize the creation of?
So I would say if you're a solo PMM, probably the first thing to do is actually talk to your sales organization. I wouldn't necessarily go in with a very specific playbook of, I want to start by assessing everything from sales skills to product knowledge or things like that. It's probably very, very worthwhile to establish a very strong relationship with your sales organization and better understand where there are some gaps. And that should help dictate where you go. I say this because having been a solo PMM before, there's sort of infinite options and infinite directions you can go. And so you might as well do it starting out with as much knowledge as possible about the population you're trying to enable and go from there and have a very, very clear bi-directional, overly transparent communication with your sales organization about, hey, here's what I heard, here's what I'm tackling in the next 6 weeks. And then make sure you have that cadence to reassess, reprioritize as you go, because you could absolutely get underwater quite quickly as a solo PMM.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would say like, so two answers. One, I think like a non-negotiable is like you got to have a really tight sort of core narrative, like of sales messaging, like, and whether you want to call that like your pitch deck or your first call deck, that's essential because like everything falls apart if you don't have good positioning that communicates like why change, why now, why us, really succinctly and in a compelling way for the sales team. But I totally agree with Madeline. Like if you're in a small company or if you're a solo team, spending time with the sales team and really diagnosing where the gaps are in the customer buyer's journey or the sales process, and then using that to like focus on where you can help. And so, one of the things that we've done before is like being able to either through surveys or interviews, like isolate where are we struggling the most? Is it around kind of initial account research and account planning and prospecting and how to get to the right ICPs to even get a meeting in the first place? Is the gap more around like how to successfully navigate a discovery call to uncover customer problems and map those to use cases or areas where we may be able to help? Is it more just on the nailing the positioning and the storytelling and the narrative? Or is it more around like kind of technical proof, like validating that we have the right solution and being able to demo it? Or is it around like a pricing, packaging, contracts, negotiation part of the sales cycle where that's where you need to kind of focus the enablement? That would be my recommendation too, is get feedback on like where the biggest challenges are and then start there.
Great. And the next question got several upvotes. So I know there are a number of people looking to get the answer to this one. Is it better to partner with the sales leader rather than the sales team to help drive sales revenue?
Both.
I definitely, oh, go ahead, Emmy.
No, I was
Sorry.
going, you go ahead. You go ahead. You start. You
No,
had
please.
so prepared.
You first. Go
No,
for
my
it.
answer was flip it, like both. I mean, I think you should be very closely aligned with sales leadership in terms of aligning on priorities. Where do you need to be spending time with the sales team? What matters most. But I think that gaining, like going back to some of what we were talking about earlier in terms of driving adoption and really gaining trust with the sales team, I think you need to be spending time with, again, the people that are having the conversations with prospects and customers every day that are having to use the content that you're creating. Is it working? Is it not working? Like just being able to get that direct feedback is really important. We've set up, kind of in every role that I've had, we've set up, that the monthly kind of check-ins between go-to-market and like a subset of the sales team where we can get different segments or maybe different even roles kind of represented to get that feedback. And so I would think about setting up something scalable with your sales team and maybe again identifying a couple of those individual reps that are going to really you can build your relationship with, but are also going to give you really direct and honest feedback about what's going on. But yeah, I guess my answer is kind of both, but in slightly different purposes.
I was going to say the same thing. Yeah, I think you got to do both because sales leadership will provide the big picture. They'll be able to pattern match trends that they're seeing across the entire global sales force. But yeah, I mean, to your point, like ultimately getting feedback from the boots on the ground sales teams that are in the trenches day to day, talking to prospects and customers is essential. The only other nuance I would provide is like if my background's in B2B product marketing, mostly selling like pretty technical products to pretty technical buyers, and so I think having a mix of feedback both from your account executives or your economic sellers, if I can use that term, as well as your sales engineers, is essential because you'll probably get a balanced perspective from those two audiences as well.
What is one AI tool or company that you recommend for gathering customer insights?
I'm going to cheat a little bit because I don't know if they're technically an AI tool. So I apologize if this doesn't directly answer the question, but I do want to do a quick plug, shameless plug for a B2B message testing software tool that we actually use in my team and have operationalized for the last couple of years. We use a tool called Winter, spelled with a Y, for like real time affordable message testing with our ICPs. And you can literally, rather than like going and spending $50,000 on like, a message testing or market research project that takes 3 to 6 months to like get results, you can literally go into this tool, input your ICPs in terms of job titles, and then upload a messaging artifact like a messaging framework or a PDF or a web page, and get qualitative real-time feedback back within 48 hours from those ICPs. It's magical and it's pretty affordable. And we also use it for like essentially market research surveys as well, because you can use it as a survey tool to basically ask questions of your ideal customer profile. So I don't know that it uses AI under the hood, but given that the focus of a lot of our conversation today is around how to craft sales messaging that resonates with your ideal customer profiles, we've gotten a ton of value out of being able to do that just to get sort of outside the building feedback from the people we're trying to market and sell to.
I'm a huge +1 on Winter. I think they're awesome. It's a great call out. I referenced it earlier, so I'll just share a little bit more. We recently implemented a tool called Peerbound, which like combs primarily Gong calls. Probably there's probably other integrations that you could have as well, but for us, it's primarily Gong. And then synthesizes feedback from customers. And primarily right now it's all positive, so it's a lot more like how do we generate customer stories, great quotes, even G2 reviews. So like what it will do is it synthesizes, like it gives us like a digest of here's a bunch of quotes that, we captured from Gong calls. If there are customers that we want to get that quote approved from to like then use, it's all automated. We can like, basically either reach out to that customer directly or have the relationship manager, kind of automatically like generate, an email from the relationship manager to the customer to approve it. We can generate the G2 review based out of the quote or based out of the conversation or context. And so it's been, I think like I would say that we're still like new enough to using it that I can't say that we've had like amazing results. I think that we're more excited about the potential, but being able to track themes, quotes, potentially generate more of these reviews that are ultimately quite valuable to creating pipeline or convincing companies that we're the right fit for them. It holds a lot of promise and we're really excited about it.
When selling a
Also
technical, oh, sorry, go ahead, Madeline.
Oh, go ahead, Jane. I was just saying, I was also going to do a callback to Notebook LM, which is a really lovely tool that lets you ground in whatever information you choose to give it. I do find that grounding is incredibly important. So whether it is market information, customer specific information, or product or company specific information. It's just a great way for your sales team to kind of have a beck and call. It's almost like you've turned the product marketer in some ways at scale into like a generative AI agent, because you have enabled this tool to be queryable, to be podcastable, back to your sales organization. So we found that to be very efficient, in particular as folks are trying to really wrap their heads around sort of a very large portfolio of information.
Thank you. That's helpful. When selling a technical product, how do you work with sales engineering, and how might that differ from working with sales reps? It's a tough one.
I can start, I suppose. I think it's a question of altitude, and this is actually kind of a journey that my team's been working on pretty actively or recently. Is really around for sales engineers, particularly if you're building, selling, marketing technical products to technical users. Sales engineers really need to be able to go a click deeper into technical proof of how you pay off your differentiators or your use cases, for example, at a deeper level of altitude than what an account executive or an economic seller would be expected to do. And I also think part of where a product marketer needs to be kind of agile is around being able to adapt their messaging to different levels of technical depth based on the audience, either internally or externally. And one of the sort of faux pas that I sometimes see with messaging that comes out of product marketing is if it becomes too high level or too reductive, where it's like every single value proposition or benefit just becomes like, oh, we're going to help you, grow revenue or improve your customer experience or cut costs or minimize risk. That starts to sound like every single other B2B software vendor out there. And so starting to kind of ground the messaging and the value propositions at a little more depth and saying things differently can really help. And I'll give you an example. Like, my team looks after observability for Splunk and Cisco, which is really all about helping like engineering and IT operations teams keep their software up and running and prevent outages and downtime. And so we use messaging, that's a slightly different click down of altitude than prevent downtime. Like, get to the root cause of problems faster and spend less time in war rooms. And it becomes more visceral and a little bit more low level in a way that resonates with target audiences more and sounds different than watered down, reductive messaging.
All right. I think we have time for one more question. So if there is a separate dedicated sales enablement function in the org, how can product marketing work best with them?
So we operate in that particular model. And the part that we found that's really, really exciting is that the sales enablement function is tapped into sales probably in a more scaled way than product marketing is necessarily. And so you can really try to identify sort of thematically what the problems are and be able to partner with sales enablement to set out, what is the calendar, what are the assets that are needed, and look at it from a programmatic level that then product marketing can use as a bit of a roadmap. So I actually find that collaboration really helpful. The other part that actually is helpful, though I am very supportive of the idea of product marketing having obviously direct relationships with salespeople, is that sometimes a sales team will be even more honest with their sales enablement group than they may be with a product marketer. And so it's also a great way to get that feedback that's even more further unfiltered based upon having that trusted relationship between those particular teams. In our case, they actually sit together. And so that also makes a difference because the reporting chain is a little bit cleaner.
Yeah, I'll just add, I've always maybe always operated where there's an enablement team, and I think that it can take a slightly different shape, but like a lot of what you were saying, Madeline, really rings true, is that they're oftentimes closer to sales. Their priorities are very much informed by, the head of sales and what is, what's important either from skill building or, kind of like knowledge retention, et cetera. So being able to really lean in with them to understand what's important to the field, what's important to the sales leaders, and then how should content be structured? I do think that this is a bit of a give and take, because sometimes as a product marketer, you might be like, no, 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 everyone really needs to understand this about what we're launching, or they really need to understand this about the audience. And so let's spend some dedicated time here. But I've also, over the years, received a lot of really great feedback from my enablement partners with respect to, how do we say things? How do we lean into a more natural way of speaking? What are the types of questions that we know that our customers are asking that we can be responsive to as we develop the content? So I think leaning into that give and take of like, how do you structure the content? How do you package it in order for it to really land with the field is a really important part of the partnership.
Yeah, only thing I'll add for organizations when we've had a dedicated field enablement function is I found that it's really beneficial when there's a strong instructional design skill set in those teams to be able to partner with product marketing. Because what a really strong instructional designer can do is they can take messaging from product marketing and figure out and provide really good insight on how to adapt it and make it engaging as a learning mechanism and as a learning vehicle for sales teams. So if you're planning like a sales kickoff, for example, and you've got some workshops or breakout sessions and looking for ways to make things more interactive, so it's not just like a dry positioning presentation and death by PowerPoint. A strong instructional design skill set can really bring that level of expertise. And same thing with crafting things like e-learnings for sales teams. So that's definitely a pattern of success that I've benefited from as a PMM.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for your time, Emmy, Michael, and Madeline, and also everyone who joined. And I'm going to pass it over to Alex for final announcements.
Hey, thank you. Yeah, I actually have one question too I wanted to ask, and then we go to closing announcements. But what's am I okay? I'm on screen. What's just more curious as you were thinking like of an AI-enabled world, what sales enablement problems do you think product marketers and product marketing teams will need to spend more time on going forward? And what's gonna be, if you think of just a lot of people in our audience who are thinking about how to just become more AI native and not doing some of the things that they necessarily spent more of their time on and being, spending more time on the areas that give them more leverage. I guess it's a question for everybody.
So for me, it has less to do with sort of the functional role, I think, of product marketing and sales, but more so the channels of discovery that customers are now facing and the expectation they have upon discovery. So I think we all know that, at least I work in B2B. I think, Michael, we have a very similar background in terms of what we've sold in the past, is that a buyer typically doesn't come to you until they've done pretty extensive research independently right now. And the way that they've done that has been historically, prior to the LLMs, website, word of mouth, all of sort of the classic different marketing channels that one could access that aren't controlled by the individual company, right? Before they come and talk to a salesperson. At this point in time, a lot of folks are actually getting recommendations directly through, say, a Gemini or a ChatGPT or, et cetera, et cetera. And so understanding something that we're looking at is like, how there's search engine optimization, it's like LLM optimization, and thinking a lot more about those discovery channels. And then more so recognizing that when a customer comes to you, they're going to have a much more sophisticated understanding of the market, of their needs, and it's going to be much more personalized. And so, Emmy, that tool that you mentioned you previously had at another role, that is going to not be a nice to have, that's going to be the expectation. And so I think with that new expectation, the way that a salesperson needs to be able to pivot the knowledge they need to have, and the way that sales enablement needs to make sure that they're capable of having those conversations for a much more sophisticated buyer, I think to me is the larger challenge that we're probably facing.
I think that's absolutely spot on. And you think about like part of how it's my belief that part of how LLMs that exist through like ChatGPT and Gemini are getting trained is by like scraping website content. So like if you're a product marketer, you better make sure your website content is a really good reflection of your messaging and the story and narrative that you want to tell. And I've made this mistake like way too many times in my career where I've kind of like let the product section of my website grow stale and underrated the value of the website as really being the #1 most visited storefront for your messaging. It gets more eyeballs than literally anything else that a PMM can create. And so I think you're spot on, Madeline. The other thing I would say is, I think we're like, at least from my team and myself, I think we're still kind of in the early days of really operationalizing AI within our day jobs as PMMs. But I think there's opportunity to look at the promise of Gen AI in particular as a productivity enabler and automating some of the lower level or kind of tactical work that PMMs have to do. In addition to being sort of just like a data point to validate messaging. So like when my team's worked up like messaging around, key use cases for products in our category, in addition to getting qualitative real world feedback from our sales teams, from customers and prospects, from analysts, and through B2B message testing with Winter, we also like bounce that stuff into like our, company's proprietary, like open, AI implementation, Gen AI implementation, just to see how like, AI would frame things up and synthesize it.
I love those examples and totally agree, Madeline. Like that's where my head, what was something that we're thinking about and certainly don't have the answer to right now. The one other thing, just like that I think we're going to need to be conscious of is just content proliferation. Like with all of the tools to create your own content decks, positioning, wording, feeding it all of this information, whether it's coming from Salesforce or Slack or Gong or other places, like there's I haven't necessarily seen this as a problem yet, but I'm just kind of predicting that it could be of that the message starts to get more like further away from the core of like what product marketing or what the company has created because there is another entity that is like using kind of that as a foundation, but then creating other messaging or other content on top of that from a sales organization. So what are the guardrails or what are kind of the guidelines that are put in place when they're not limited to only the content that you create, but really unlimited in terms of anything that could be put together?
No, those are really, really good insights. So I think like the main things are AI is going to impact buyer research. So we have to enable sales for a sophisticated buyer and figure out how to get into the buyer's AI research journey. Operationalize AI to handle some of the low-hanging fruit things that we're building out. And then also, if it's easy to create content, how do you create guardrails? Because now this goes off the rails. This is really good. This is a great panel. Everybody, I really appreciate you taking time to chat. And for everybody in the audience, if you're looking for your next opportunity or you're thinking about your next opportunity, look these people up and see where they're working and if they have any roles on their team, because the best way you're going to grow as a product marketer is by learning from the best, and these are the best. So first, thank you to everybody on the panel and Jane for moderating.